Here's the thing about hope. It's only as good as the weight it can bear. People place their hopes in all sorts of things. A good workout, a politician, a diet, a savings account, a career trajectory, a boyfriend that turned into a husband, a child's grades. I haven't found any one of these things to be able to bear the weight of my hope. Hope is just too heavy, too unwieldy for one thing or person to bear. For example, my husband. He is really great. Mark and I met in college and were best friends for about 2 years before I came to my senses and fell in love with him. Mark is phenomenal. He works hard, he loves Jesus, he's devoted to me and to our 3 kids, and he still, after all these years, can make me laugh until I cry. He is not, however, Jesus. He cannot bear the weight of my hopes and dreams. He's flawed and broken, like I am flawed and broken, and the math of that will never work. One raggedy human plus another raggedy human will never equal 2 whole humans. We need a living, breathing, supernatural hope to sustain all the burdens we fling onto it. We need what God freely gave, Jesus, who Peter describes in his letter as a living hope who gives us an inheritance that can never perish, spoil, or fade. During college, I sang with the choir, and we were invited to travel all over the world, schlepping our purple velvet robes with us. One January term, we got to spend the whole month in New Zealand and Australia. Many nights, host families would put us up in pairs, and at one stop in New Zealand, my dear friend Susan and I were the guests of Hans and Yola. Hans and Yola were a sweet older couple who lived in a charming house. They took us for a walk on a nearby beach, and they fed us dinner. And afterward, Hans asked that we come into the living room and sit on the couch and watch a video. He was a veteran of World War II, he said. He fought for the Germans, he said. And then he popped in the VCR some Nazi propaganda, an entire hour about how Hitler was a pretty great guy, actually, and that there weren't 6 million Jews who died, but only 1 million. Suze and I sat with our mouths hanging open. Yola paced in the back of the room while Hans prattled on long after the video ended in the most even, measured tone. Hans and Yola had spent their entire lives on the wrong team, banking on a dead hope. Susan and I met them 50 years after the war, and they were still propping up that hope in the living room corner, still convincing themselves that they weren't wrong, that their thinking wasn't deplorable, that evil was good, and everyone else just didn't see it. Jesus is the only one who can bear the weight of humanity's hope, and the beautiful part is that he is inviting us to place our hope in him. Psalm 147 says that God actually takes delight in those who hope in his unfailing love. If you've been placing your hope in someone or something other than the God who loves you like crazy, take it off of that person or thing and root it in God. He can take it. He can stand up under it. In fact, he's asking you to hope in his unfailing love. His stats are way better than the doofus you've been trusting in. No offense to all of us doofuses. Something ridiculously beautiful happens when we put our hope in the Lord. Our strength gets a reboot. We get this wave of joy and courage and a new dollop of strength. I've absolutely been crawling to bed every night, haven't you? I am tired to my bones. Isaiah wrote that those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will run and not grow weary, walk and not grow faint. I am not an expert on anything, really, but my guess is that renewed strength happens because God loves humility. The Bible is chock full of stories where God opposes the proud and gives grace to the humble. I think he knows that it is physically, spiritually, emotionally good for us to humble ourselves, to stop misplacing our hope, and just put it all in him where it belongs. When we take that step of humility and just lay it all down for him, we get renewed strength. So what does it look like in a time like this to hope in the Lord? How do we do that? I tend to complicate things, so I would say keep it simple. Spend time in prayer. Prayer is a word that freaks people out. Maybe you're picturing some flowery speech made in a serene voice while you wear nice clothes. I would avoid that. When someone loves you, calls and asks to chat on the phone, you don't say, "Hold, please let me change. I have a dress somewhere, and I need to touch up my makeup. Also, I have a few things written." No, when someone calls you and who loves you, you launch into laughter and stories and tears and just talk, no agenda, just whatever's on your heart and your mind. That's prayer. No makeup, emotional or otherwise. Just talk with God and tell him you're scared because the savings account is starting to look awfully puny. Tell him you're frustrated with your kids and might lose it if you hear, "Mom, mom, 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 mom," one more time today. Tell him you're tired. Ask him to help you to hope in him alone and that you need a shot of that renewed strength ASAP. And he will hear. There's a slew of Bible verses about how God hears our prayers and that he loves that kind of communion with him, but here's one that sums it up. Jeremiah 29:12, "You will call on me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you." Don't make prayer weird. Just start talking and listening and talking and listening. God will meet you where you are. He will renew your strength, and he will give you not a tired old hope, but a living one that can bear the weight of all you need. I want to leave you with a story about what it looks like to hope in the Lord. My best friend, Betsy, not just the Betsy behind the camera, although she is phenomenal too, is a professional God hoper. She's had a lot of practice. We have known each other since college when we were children, 4 years old. And now we travel together. Our husbands adore each other. We have babies who are now not babies and who've ended up as best friends. But Betsy's road has had some serious washed out bridges. When she was a teenager, Bets was diagnosed with lupus. It has wreaked havoc on her body for about 30 years. When Betsy was about 28, she was pregnant with her second child, and though her first pregnancy with Olivia was fairly uneventful, this pregnancy flared her lupus to the point that she was in the hospital. Soon she was in a medically induced coma and was admitted to the ICU. This time became so brutal and so drawn out. For weeks, Betsy was intubated. She lost the baby. We were called in several times and told by the doctors it's time to say goodbye. I remember being on my couch where we were living in Lincoln, Nebraska, and it was late at night, and Ryan had called and said, "You have to pray because we have to go say goodbye." And I remember howling while I prayed. I've never prayed like that before or since. I understand those Bible verses about how sometimes you just don't have words. There weren't even words. Betsy's little girl, Olivia, was about 18 months old at the time. And I would take turns going back and forth between Nebraska and Minneapolis, and I would take care of Liv. I remember one time her dad came down, Betsy's dad came down in the morning, and I was feeding Olivia her breakfast. And Chuck, I looked up and he had tears falling down his face. And he said, "Do you think she remembers her mom?" It was brutal. And I have learned so much from being a part of that story. The battle cry of her husband, Ryan, and of all of us who love Betsy became Psalm 27:13, which says, "I remain confident of this. Surely I will see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living." There's so much more to that story, and when we can be in the same room and have coffee together, I will tell you the rest. But Betsy has been a real life example of how to hope in the Lord. She has taught me to believe God when he says he will make all things new, and to trust his timeline on that instead of my own. She's taught me that a living hope wins, and it is fully, completely trustworthy. Through a long recovery and through grief for her baby and through the waiting for total health, she has taught me that God's goodness is near and it's palpable, even when days are long and hard. Today, let's check where we're placing our hope. And if it's anywhere but on Jesus, let's just move it over to where it belongs. Have a good, honest conversation with God and put the weight of what we plan for, hope for, dream for, exactly on his shoulders, the only ones who can stand up under it.